Hi, Amina here. So on Sunday, I asked guys to ask me questions regarding carbs. I get this question over and over again. I tell people to go low carb and people don't understand what is low carb, what it means. And so this is like, there's a lot to be said about carbs, but this is just sort of like an introduction as I try and answer some of the most frequent questions I get about carbohydrates. So let's start. Like I always say, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nutritionist, I'm just someone who has lost weight and I've learned a few things. And I generally love to read and get information about health and wellness. So yeah, carbohydrates. What are carbohydrates? What are carbs? Carbs are just carbohydrates, the shortcut of carbohydrates. They're among the 3 macronutrients that our body requires for energy. And then the other 2 micronutrients our body requires is fat, and of course, fat and protein. So when it comes to carbohydrates, carbohydrates are anything, any category of food that once consumed are broken down into sugars. Okay? So what typically most of the foods that we consume on a day-to-day basis contain carbs, because they contain, once we consume them, they are broken down into sugar. Okay? So there are 2 categories of carbohydrates, are divided into 2 categories. Sorry, just to get back, some of the food groups that contain carbs include fruits, vegetables, grains, sugar, starches, dairy, seeds. So just generally, most of the foods that we consume contain carbs. So now we get to the 2 categories. The 2 categories are just they're divided into those 2 categories because of how the molecular structure and how once they are broken down, the effect they have on our blood glucose or the sugar in our body. So there's the simple and the complex. The simple is just sugar. And some of the example of simple carbohydrates, they include raw sugar, brown sugar, corn syrup, fructose, glucose. Fructose is the natural occurring sugars in fruits. There's a fruit juice concentrate. So simple carbs are just sugar, plain old sugar in different forms. And this is very important to know this type of the forms of sugar, because most processed food contain these sugars. So it's very important as you go about your day-to-day life, you read labels of packages and try and understand the type of sugar, especially something to do with corn syrup, maltose, dextrose. There are different sugars just in processed food that people don't understand. So simple carbohydrates these are some of the examples. So when you consume simple carbohydrates, they're immediately broken down into sugar, and they spike your blood glucose or your blood glucose high and fast. And so after one and a half hours to 2 hours, you start feeling like you're hungry and you require more and more of it. So you tend to consume more of it. And of course, it has an effect on your insulin. And we know insulin is the fat burning hormone, and the presence of insulin, no fat burning can occur. So yeah, so simple carbohydrates are the ones you should run from. And this is for the people who want to lose weight. Run. When you see any type of sugars, just know that's not good for you. Even the people who are not losing weight, simple sugars are bad. So simple carbs are bad. So now we move to complex carbohydrates. And this is like it's a debate that people are having. And when I talk about this complex carbs, I'm just going to talk about from my point of view and how I understand it. So I would love to hear your feedback. Tell me what you think about the different things that I'm going to address in this video. Tell me what is your take on simple and complex carbohydrates, and where you stand on the huge debate if carbs are bad or good. So yeah, complex carbohydrates are, when you come to their molecular structures, they are long chain of glucose. When I say glucose, I mean sugar. So they are broken down into the body. But the difference between them and the simple ones is that first, they have other nutrients apart from sugar. They have fiber, they have other micronutrients our body requires. So they're better than the simple sugars. They also take more time. For the simple sugars, they break down easily. Their chains of glucose are broken down easily. Their bonds are sort of not, I don't want to use a wrong word. I don't want to, maybe they are not strong, but now when it comes to complex, they are complicated. Like the word, this is my explanation. They are complex, so it takes time to break down, and then they gradually will rise your glucose or blood glucose slowly compared to this one. So you'll feel full for long and you gradually spike your blood glucose, but they still spike your blood glucose. So what are the some examples of complex carb? They include fiber and they include starch. Now when it comes to starch, starch is it's a form of carbohydrates, and there are two categories in terms of starches. There's non-starchy and starchy. So when you're looking at complex carb, you should run away from starchy carbohydrates. Those are the ones that they're simply like sort of, if you look at the non-starchy and starchy, the starchy ones easily break down, not as fast as simple sugars, but simple carbs, but they slightly act the same. Something like potatoes. We hear when you're on a weight loss journey, potatoes, because they simply have a high net carb, and then they also break down easily into sugar. So when you look at complex carbs, you should stay away from starchy vegetables. I'll add a photo of or a picture that has the examples of starchy and unstarchy, so that you can screenshot and save. And just know, as you go through planning what you'll eat, you stay away from starchy vegetables, fruits, and anything that has starch. You move towards the non-starchy vegetables, fruits. So the two categories, there's the simple and the complex. The complex has starch and then it has fiber. Now fiber is very, very good. Fiber, the amount of sugar that will be spiked once you take most of the foods that has fiber will not be as bad as when you take simple sugars. So what fiber is part of a plant. Most plants have fiber. Once you take fiber, it cannot be digested in the body. So it's very important because it goes through your system and it's good for your gut. So there are two types of fiber. There's the soluble and insoluble. The soluble, of course, it means once you take it, it dissolves in water and goes through your digestive system. When it dissolves with the water you take. And then there's the insoluble, which doesn't mix with water. So what are the sources of fiber? Include fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, seeds. So yeah, the fiber is very important. So I'm trying to run through what it is, but I'll get into details when it comes to when I do a different video on fiber and a different video on starches, on a different video on vegetables, because the next video I'm going to post is about vegetables. So we get into details about knowing the carbs in most of our vegetables and in our fruits. So don't worry when you're not getting this. Is just an introduction of what are carbs. So when you're looking at carbs, and this is the most important thing that I want to tell you, you should, if you're on a weight loss journey, be very, very, very conversant with the glycemic index, or what they call GI. I will link it also. I'll put screenshots of the glycemic index so you can take a screenshot and save it. But the glycemic index should be your best friend. The glycemic index is how carbohydrates, once you eat, how they spike your blood glucose. And this is very important because let's say you want to eat a slice of brown bread. when you look at the glycemic index, compare it to white bread, it will tell you that there is no huge difference. That's 75 and 74. So every time you want to eat foods that you know the difference, from fruits to vegetables to dairy to grains, you just look at the glycemic index, and it gives you a rough idea of the amount of sugar or blood glucose that you'll get once you consume it. So anytime you eat carbs, just look or be conversant with the glycemic index. I think I have introduced this is just an introduction. So just know carbs are any food once consumed break down into sugar. There are two categories. There's a simple, which includes just the sugars, the corn syrup, the fructose, the glucose, the plain sugar, the brown sugar, and then there's the complex, which include fiber, starches. So the two categories, the starches, you look for non-starchy vegetables and fruits and foods, and then fiber is good. So I'm going to do a different video next. I think I'll post it on Thursday about vegetables. Then we're going to go into details. But I'll also link the glycemic index screenshot of that so you can take a look and learn more. And also some of examples of non-starchy and starchy food. So if you have any other question, if you have anything else to tell me, because you know I don't know anything, just comment down below. And guys, remember that carbs are not your enemies. It's just being smart, because I've been asked over and over again, are carbs bad? Are carbs this and that? So carbs are not bad. Carbs are not your enemies. You just need to be smart. And in case I have not answered all your questions, just know I'm going to do a separate video on low carb. What is low carb? How low carb looks like. This is just an introduction for those people who don't know about carbs. So I'd love to hear your feedback. Tell me what you think. And thank you for all the love and the support and the DMs and the words of encouragement. I appreciate it. And thank you for watching. Bye-bye.